Hello, hello, hello. I hope you guys are having a great day out there, because I sure know that I am. And of course, you know why I'm having a great day. It's because we finally live in the era of Metroid Prime 4. It's Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. It's been a few days, but I am still just reveling in this entire existence that I suddenly get to live as a huge Metroid fan. And somebody, again, as I discussed, who's been running a YouTube channel for over 10 years, and 70% of that time, 7 years, has been dedicated to waiting for Metroid Prime 4 and discussing it and doing what I can to keep the excitement alive for Metroid Prime 4 and helping carry that torch, so to speak, along with other folks doing the same. I don't want to pretend like I'm the only one, of course, who's been doing that, but helping carry that torch for this game's eventual reveal. And we're here, man. And as I alluded to in my last video, I feel like I'm kind of entering finally a new phase for my time being a YouTuber and kind of covering this stuff. I won't be doing this forever. I might not even be doing it for that much longer. But for now, with Metroid Prime 4 Beyond being a real game with a teaser and some gameplay and stuff to talk about, I can finally start digging deep. And digging deep is what we are going to do today, my friends, because I want to talk about one of the most important potential, and that is the key word here, potential elements that might be happening in Metroid Prime 4, something I've been theorizing about for years, actually, even way before we had this trailer and this footage. Again, if you've been following me over the years and been following my Metroid conversations, you've heard me mention this in the past, and now with this first official footage from Metroid Prime 4, I feel like we have enough to go on to say that this might be something they're doing. And what I'm theorizing about, what I think was hinted at in the trailer, is a big time jump from the end of Metroid Prime 3 to whenever the heck Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is going to take place. Now, it's only been a few days, and I, just along with the rest of you, are constantly poring over this 2 minutes worth of footage and trying to find new hints and glimpses at things that we might be able to take away from it and speculate on as far as Metroid Prime 4. There isn't a whole lot to go on. I think people sometimes forget we really didn't get a whole lot of information in that trailer. It was only like 60 seconds, 90 seconds worth of quick gameplay cuts, and then that final shot of the larger open world, some forest planet area that we're looking at. And that's all we had. That doesn't mean that there aren't things to take away from it, which is what we're going to discuss with this time jump situation here. But I think it's important to notice that I, and probably other people, will come up with new things and discover new things over the course of the next coming days and weeks, and maybe even months, until the next footage we see. And so I want to point out the three main things that I think from this trailer shows us that we might be looking at some kind of a time jump, and where it both helps that theory and where it also kind of maybe changes or hinders that theory in certain ways. It's very interesting, and I want to go over these 3 points with you. So first, we have to talk about probably the biggest and most important reveal within the Metroid Prime 4 Beyond trailer, beyond just seeing actual gameplay. It's the fact that Sylux was confirmed to be returning as an antagonist, as a threat to Samus, a force that's probably, in a sense, maybe hunting her down. We're not quite sure what the conceit of their dynamic is going to be. I do have theories about that, though, which will come up in a future video. But outside of that, the fact that Sylux is returning, huge reveal, we all expected it, now we know it's actually happening. Very exciting. I cannot wait to see what this is going to be like in this game. Now, along with Sylux's reveal, as we all know from that trailer, were the fact that he had both space pirates and what looked to be Metroids, Metroid-like creatures, accompanying him as he blasts through that door, revealing himself to Samus, space pirates flanking him, and he's got 2 Metroid creatures behind him. This was a big deal because we're just seeing Sylux paired with space pirates and Metroids to be coming after Samus. Okay, so that's kind of changing or adding some color and flavor to the dynamic of whatever Sylux's motivations are going to be in this game, and it was exciting to see those Metroids. Now, it's been a few days, so I'm sure that we've all been made well aware of the big revelation of those Metroids that are flanking Sylux behind him here. And I'll admit, in my breakdown video, this is something I did not touch on because honestly, I didn't even notice it. Even me, a huge Metroid fan that dedicates more than half of my channel to discussing this game in this series, and I know this lore very, very well, obviously, I didn't notice this, and there's a few reasons why I didn't notice this, but what was noticed that I want to further discuss, and this does factor into the possible time jump here, is the fact that those don't appear to be regular Metroids. They are what's known as Mochtroids. Mochtroids are essentially failed attempts by the space pirates in the era of Super Metroid to try to recreate or clone Metroids and Metroid creatures. And we have to remember that Super Metroid takes place many, many years after the events of Metroid 1, the Metroid Prime trilogy, and Metroid 2. Regular Metroids have 3 nuclei-type things, organs, housed within their membrane, and Mochtroids, the failed clone attempts by the space pirates, only have 1 nuclei within them. And so that's the key visual difference between the two of them. And when you go back and look at this close-up of Sylux and the Metroids behind him, you can see, upon closer inspection, something I didn't notice, they do appear to only have 1 nuclei. And again, the fact that he is appearing alongside of other space pirates tells us he is with those space pirates. The space pirates have been trying to clone Metroids. They've clearly been failing, but they are still accompanied by Mochtroids. So the reason I didn't initially notice that these were most likely Mochtroids when I was reviewing the trailer footage, even though I had seen it like 15 times over by that point, is twofold. One is, if I'm gonna be honest, I just didn't look that closely at them simply because when I was looking at the picture, even the close-up, I just saw Sylux. I could just see, oh, there's 2 Metroids flanking him. And I honestly didn't think to look that much deeper into it. The other is, I happen to be really, really colorblind, and if you follow me on Twitter, I've mentioned that over the years, because being colorblind does factor in to making certain elements of playing video games difficult, depending on how video games are incorporating color into whatever they're asking you to do or to identify. And not every game handles color identification the same, and they don't always handle it that well. And so that's just the reason I've tweeted about being colorblind over the past. The reason I'm bringing it up here is, I think that the reason the single nuclei didn't just jump out to me as an obvious thing, and I could be wrong. You guys who are not colorblind can tell me if this makes sense for your vision. For me, the very, very dark background of this close-up, juxtaposed with the Metroids and the nuclei within them, it just, the color of the nuclei and the color of the background, whatever those colors even are, I couldn't tell you what they are, they just blur together. And so let's say there was a white background where you could clearly see the dark colored nuclei against the backdrop of a brightly colored bright white or a bright yellow background or something. It would have been so obvious and jumped out to me so clearly. I would have immediately keyed into it. With this very dark room and this dark background and the dark color of the nuclei, it just was all very it just looked very samey to me. And so maybe the colorblind isn't a factor. I'm not trying to use that as like a, oh, poor me, I have a handicap, because I don't view being colorblind as the same kind of handicap, so I'm not trying to be that guy personally. I'm just saying maybe that's why, A, I just didn't look at the Metroids that closely. I was looking at Sylux, and B, I'm colorblind. Maybe the nuclei didn't pop out of the screen the way it did for other folks. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk about how the existence of these most likely Mochtroids, it's not really confirmed, but let's be honest, that's what they look like. They're probably Mochtroids. Why are the Mochtroids important to this theory about a time jump? Well, again, I've been speculating for a while, like I said, many years, that it would be really cool and very possible for Metroid Prime 4 to feature a significant time jump, because going way back into the past after the recent release of Metroid Dread didn't seem as exciting, because Metroid Prime 4 taking place immediately after Metroid Prime 3, which certainly could make sense and is technically still possible. I just feel like that becomes less interesting from Nintendo's perspective. And so I always wanted to believe that Nintendo was considering the possibility of moving Metroid Prime 4 up in the timeline of the series. And so with Mochtroids, like I alluded to earlier in the video, they were first seen and introduced in the series in Super Metroid. Super Metroid, which is Metroid 3, again takes place long after the events of Metroid Primes 1, 2, and 3. So the end of the trilogy, Metroid Prime 3 in 2007. That game takes place before Metroid 2, and then from Metroid 2, we go ahead quite a while until we hit Metroid 3, which is Super Metroid. That's where we first see Mochtroids. If we're to take the first reveal of Mochtroids in Super Metroid at face value and say this is the first time they ever existed, this is the first time the space pirates, many years after the events of Metroid Prime 3, tried to recreate and to clone Metroids, then that means the existence of Mochtroids behind Sylux in this trailer tells us bare minimum, I mean the earliest in the timeline we could possibly be looking at, is around the time of Super Metroid or later. And so in my opinion, if those are Mochtroids, and we are seeing confirmation that this game takes place at the timeline of Super Metroid or later, which we know it does because of the year, and I'll get to that in a minute, then that means that my longtime theory of a time jump between Metroid Primes 3 and 4 is already proven true, which I'm just very proud of to say, hey, I've been theorizing that for years with no evidence other than my own theories to go on, and I think we basically have confirmation there is a huge time jump. We're going from Metroid Prime 3, we're bypassing Metroid 2, we're bypassing Super Metroid, and sometime after Super Metroid, Sylux catches up to Samus, and here we are playing the events of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. So suddenly, that means we're playing in the timelines of Metroid Other M, Metroid Fusion, and Metroid Dread. Because after Super Metroid, those are the 3 games that happen within the timeline. And in theory, this game, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, takes place sometime around one of those 3 games, or maybe even, as I said in my last video, at the end of the timeline, after the events of Super Metroid. This is huge. And this is why we have to revisit the very beginning of the trailer, where they tell us literally what canonical Metroid year we're visiting when we see that this takes place in Cosmic Year 20X9. I mentioned this in my trailer breakdown video, and I'll mention it again. The first Metroid we know takes place around the year 20X5. Super Metroid, which again, first appearance of the Mochtroids, is theorized to be and hinted at to be around the year 20X7. So if we look at 20X7 for Super Metroid, we look at 20X9 for Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, well, we're looking at 2 years difference. So this game does take place, in theory, 2 years around after the events of Super Metroid. So we've got the Mochtroids, which couldn't exist before Super Metroids. We have, or Super Metroid, the game, sorry, and we have the year 20X9 telling us we're 2 years beyond the events of Super Metroid. Now, I'll be honest with you, and I tried to research this myself. I couldn't find any confirmation. Whenever Metroid's Other M and Fusion and Dread take place in terms of the cosmic year, I don't know if we really know that. Maybe somebody else does, and feel free to correct me in the comments below. Look, I'm a Metroid lore expert, but I'm not going to pretend to know everything. You might know something more that I don't know that I couldn't find, and I'm happy to hear and learn about it. But from what I understand, we go 20X7 for Super Metroid, 20X9 for Metroid Prime 4. Metroid's Other M and Fusion and Dread, I don't think we're quite sure. So all we know is this game time jumps after Prime 3 and leapfrogs Metroids 2 and Super Metroid and is dancing in that space of those other games that take place after Super Metroid, which makes me extremely excited. Whenever 20X9 is, it's sometime way after Super Metroid, and I can't wait to see when it actually takes place. Now, all of that was based off of the one of 3 things that I told you actually gave us a hint at this time jump. And that's, again, I wasn't even really factoring in the fact that the trailer said 20X9. So it immediately tells us there's a time jump based simply on the fact that the Prime trilogy is pre-20X7. This game takes place in 20X9, right? So we know that there was a time jump for that. Then I just spent many minutes going over the Mochtroid situation. That absolutely tells us this game is taking place after Super Metroid, unless Nintendo is pulling some trickery and messing with the years and all that stuff. This game takes place after Super Metroid. So, time jump confirmed. Now, there are 2 other things that I noticed. Again, the fans helped me realize the Mochtroid thing, but there are 2 other things I have noticed that factor into my own theory. I spent a lot of time telling you guys in my trailer breakdown video that I think there is a great chance this game might be taking place after Metroid Dread, making it the farthest in the timeline. Now, that is, I don't care what anyone says, a lot of people saying those are Mochtroids, there's no way it takes place after Metroid Dread, yada yada yada. And of course that is possible, but I'm here to tell you, It is also possible that this game could take place after Metroid Dread. Nothing is off the table. The only thing we can say definitively is that this game takes place after Super Metroid, again, confirming the time jump. Hey guys, this is Rob from the future while doing some editing, and one thing I wanted to add and insert into this part of the discussion, something I forgot to kind of mention during this, is when it comes to the Mochtroids, not only does it only confirm that this game is going to take place at Super Metroid or later in the timeline, one of the ways it, in a roundabout way, could almost help assist in showing how this game could take place after Metroid Dread is that by the time of Metroid Fusion and Metroid Dread, technically, all of the Metroids are wiped out. And so Sylux showing up with Mochtroids, yes, it could simply be because this game is taking place around the time the Space Pirates started creating Mochtroids in Super Metroid, but it also could be that he has Mochtroids simply because they're the only Metroids around anymore, which again would only be possible after the events of Metroid Fusion and Metroid Dread. So, I just want to reiterate the fact that the existence of Mochtroids doesn't eliminate this game from being at the end of the timeline after Metroid Dread, the way a lot of people have been claiming, especially in response to my breakdown video, saying, oh, those are Mochtroids, it's impossible for this game to be after Metroid Dread. And I simply push back on that, saying that doesn't make it impossible, and in some ways you could say it almost aids in that theory simply because they might be the only way any Metroid could exist after Metroid Fusion and Dread. So, again, not confirmed, just wanted to add this as a part of the discussion. Now, while I do still think this game might take place after Metroid Dread, and honestly, I kind of would like it to take place after Metroid Dread, here are the two things I noticed myself after I made my trailer breakdown that kind of hurts my theory of this game taking place after Metroid Dread, and it is twofold. One is Samus's suit, the other is Samus's gunship. Now, in order to break this stuff down, we have to address one huge elephant in the room, and it's the fact that there has been a lot of discussion over the years about Yoshio Sakamoto, the creator and director of Metroid and most of the games except for the Prime games. The fact that some people claim he has said that the Metroid Prime games are not actually canon and only the 2D games and Other M, because yes, that game is canon, only the 2D games and Other M, the game that he has been responsible for, are actually canon. The Prime games are in their own separate timeline. That has long since been proven not true. You can find the interviews. In 2010, when he was promoting Metroid Other M, as a matter of fact, is when he actually said he basically views the adventure and the story of Metroid Prime as its own contained thing outside of the story of the 2D games, but he has never definitively stated that he views them as a separate timeline or a separate, universe or whatever. Nintendo and Sakamoto have long since confirmed it's all the same timeline. The Prime trilogy, including Hunters and Federation Force, take place between Metroids 1 and 2. They're in the same timeline. And so when I start to compare Samus's armor and her gunship to Metroid Dread and Metroid Prime 4, they are in the same timeline, so don't go overthinking Sakamoto's quotes because none of that stuff is actually true. And so, now that I've told you we're looking at Samus's armor and her gunship, it's probably pretty obvious to you what I noticed and what I'm going to talk about. The idea of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond taking place after Metroid Dread is hindered by the fact that her suit, her Varia suit, matches the exact suit design and style of everything we see in the 3 Metroid Prime games, as does her gunship. Her gunship, and I did talk about this in my breakdown video, very much matches the gunship she was using in Metroid Prime 3. And so for this game to take place after Metroid Dread, we'd have to look at what Samus's suit looks like by the end of Metroid Dread, and we're not even factoring in the fact that now she can also harness her Metroid energy after Metroid Dread and Metroid Fusion. It's not even really just Metroid Dread. It's the idea of this game taking place both after Metroid Dread and Metroid Fusion, because of the Fusion suit and the Metroid DNA and all that stuff. And they could pull some trickery and still make it possible for this to all work, but I'm kind of starting to lean towards maybe this isn't the case. After Metroid Fusion and Metroid Dread, her suit should look very, very different. And after Metroid Dread, her gunship is also completely different than any gunship we've ever seen before, both in color and style and design. And the fact that we're looking at her Metroid Prime 3 gunship and her Metroid Prime series Varia suit tells me it doesn't match up with the suit and gunship she's using in Metroid Fusion and Metroid Dread, which, for all we know as of right now, are the two games that take place at the end of the timeline. And so I think, if I was to really come to a more definitive general prediction, even though I am not ruling out the fact that this game might take place after Dread, if I was to come to a more definitive conclusion with more time and more analysis on my side, I'm thinking that Metroid Dread... Good God, these games are all blurring together in my brain. Metroid Prime 4 Beyond more than likely takes place around the events of Metroid Other M. So we're after Super Metroid, we're before Metroid Fusion probably, so we're in the space of Other M. We might be before Other M, we might be after Other M. Tough to say for sure. But that's what I think we're looking at when it comes to Metroid Prime 4. The exciting thing is, this is all we can speculate about for now. We have who knows how many months until we see the next trailer and the next dump of information from Nintendo about Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. We're also waiting to see if it's tied into the next generation console, the Switch 2. I certainly think it probably will be. I'm expecting and hoping more information to accompany the Switch 2 reveal. Nintendo has told us that's coming soon, and I think Metroid Prime 4 will be a big part of that, so that they can showcase this game as a launch game for the Switch 2, as well as hopefully showcasing the graphics and power of the Switch 2, if in fact this game will look and run even better on that console. Again, that's all speculation, but it is kind of what I think is going to happen. And so whenever we get the next trailer, and like I said, the next dump of information, we're going to understand a lot more. Again, think about what they showed us, you guys. That 60 seconds of Samus running through that planet and that ground battle and killing a couple of space pirates, scanning the dead one, and then coming across Sylux, that's all we saw of the gameplay and of the actual game. And other than the reveal of Sylux and the Mochtroids, we don't understand any other story context. Now, as I've shown you in this very long video, we can infer a lot about the timeline and the jump in time that I have been speculating about for years. And so, at least we know something is happening there, and that is extremely exciting. But we still have to wait for Nintendo to confirm some of this. And like I said, I'm not putting it past Nintendo or Retro to pull some trickery and maybe surprise us and say, oh, it's not exactly what you think, and the game does take place right after Metroid Prime 3. Or they could say it does take place at the end of the timeline, after Metroid Dread. Forget the Mochtroids, forget her suit, forget the gunship. We're just going to set this after Metroid Dread, and you're going to have to deal with it. They can do whatever they want, but I'm sticking to my current theory that we've got a big time jump. We're sometime after Super Metroid. We're probably somewhere around the time of Other M. I think we're probably more pre-Metroid Fusion than post-Metroid Dread. But, last time I'll say it, anything is still possible, even after Metroid Dread. I can't wait to dig in more. I have plenty of other Metroid Prime 4 videos to make for you guys, so please look forward to those sometime soon. Share your thoughts about this theory below. I can't wait to talk with you guys about it, and I will see you again next time.